My mom was on her routine night shift at the hospital, and I knew I wouldn't see her till the next morning, probably in a deep sleep on her bed, likely still in her uniform. I always made her breakfast before I would leave for school in the morning, so she could wake up to a nice meal. I use the word nice loosely. It's the best I could do considering I'm 16 and failed my home economics class last year. But my mom never minded the toast, scrambled eggs, and turkey bacon platter left on her nightstand. We had said our goodbyes around 10:15, and I got myself comfortable on the couch with my dog to watch some TV. I turned the lights off over us to set the scene and make it feel more immersive. I had got through one Dateline episode when I decided that I could enjoy the experience a little more if I grabbed my bong. So, I went upstairs and down the long, narrow hallway that led to my wing of the house. I was the only occupied room on this side of the house. The other rooms were my dad's old office and the guest room, though that room hasn't had a guest in it for years. Ever since my dad's passing, my mom and I haven't even wanted to host other people here. Instead, it hosts the overload of clutter I find at the end of every school year. Clothes that I no longer want and plan on selling or donating, paintings I worked months on but never hang up, and other miscellaneous items that aren't used but can't seem to be let go of either. I opened my bedroom door and grabbed the piece off my nightstand. It was almost a sculpture rather than a cheesy bong you might imagine when thinking of a stoner. It was about 16 inches tall and made completely out of this blue, hand-blown glass that resembled the color the ocean looks after a series of rough waves. The glass swirled in an upward motion towards the mouthpiece that made it look like it was water, frozen in time. My favorite feature of this prized possession is its ability to glow in the dark. After letting it sit in the sun for a bit, flecks in the glass would glow a bright green at night. I walked back down the hallway with it, then back down the stairs until I was sitting down on the couch next to my dog, Pepe. He was sound asleep as I started to grind up the green, sticky plant matter, which was genuinely what the name was, plant matter. It was this new strain I had just bought from my regular plug from the next town over. He had told me he just recently got a limited supply of this stuff and asked me if I could be one of his test subjects to see if he should buy more. Without hesitation, I agreed. Discounted weed to just give my feedback? I'd be a fool not to take that offer, so I did. Holding it in my hand, I saw a multitude of colors that reflected off its crystals. It's common to see colors like purple and orange, but this stuff had shades of red, blue, and pink. Odd, I thought. But I was taken over by more intrigue than suspicion, so I continued to put some in the bowl and pack it down with my lighter. After the first inhale, I got the taste of ordinary weed, but soon followed by a slight trace of citrus. It was pleasant. I was paying extra attention to the experience so I could give a good, detailed report back to the plug like he had asked. About 15 minutes went by, Dateline was still playing, and this specific episode seemed to be extra interesting to me in my new hazy state. The cushions beneath me started to almost mold to my body. I felt as though I was sinking yet weighed as light as a feather at the same time. My eyes started to get dry, and trying to keep them open became a task more so than a natural ability at this point. As I slowly started to move my eyes behind my lids, I realized that I had fallen asleep. It must have been for quite a while because I felt so sluggish, like it used all the strength within me just to be able to fully open my eyes. The lights above the living room were still off, like I had left them, but the all others on the downstairs floor were too. Something I had not done. It was now pitch black everywhere except for the surrounding area where the light emitting from the TV could reach, which was not very far. The second thing I noticed was what sent a cold chill running through my body and caused my heart to stop momentarily. I was paralyzed. I was physically unable to move any part of my body other than my eyes, tips of fingers, and toes. I was only able to produce slight twitches, but it took so much strength out of me to do so. So there I was, almost completely paralyzed, unable to move or scream for help while the TV continued the program like I was still an attentive, consenting viewer. Pepe was still soundly asleep beside me, blissfully unaware of the living hell I was experiencing just inches away from his sleeping little head. I tried reaching for him. Maybe he would wake up and sense my distress and then what? I thought to myself, what the hell could happen next that would possibly help me in this situation? The answer was nothing. I felt as though Keith Morrison was now mocking me, and the couch cushion below that once felt made for me was now stiff and cold. as if every fiber in the fabric was rejecting contact to my body. I reasonably started to panic, not because the realization of my situation was settling in, but because I heard a creak from upstairs. I knew this house like the back of my hand. It's the only house I have ever lived in, so I knew that each floorboard had its own distinct creak, and this one I recognized as the top of the stairs. Someone was in my home, and they were standing at the top of the staircase that led down directly to the room I was in. Each crack that followed the last made my eyes water. The fear I felt distorted each sound to resemble what I might imagine a rib being snapped in half would make. Hearing the footsteps slowly descend the stairs made my stomach turn, and my body want to writhe in pain from the inside out. Staring at the one visible stair from my position on the couch made me want to retreat backwards and find security in the couch. I did not want to see the intruder, the person who would be able to have their way with me in such a vulnerable state. But I could not rip my eyes from the stair. I knew danger was coming, but I just couldn't look away. If someone was going to do whatever evil they intended, I was going to see it approaching whether or not I truly wanted to. Seconds felt like minutes. My heart raced so fast that each beat felt moments apart. I was dripping in sweat even though my body couldn't move. The sound from the TV gradually faded away and was replaced with a long, piercing ringing in its place. The creaks that belonged to the stairs near me echoed as the unidentified subject's weight pressed down on them. Through the dim lighting, I made out what seemed to be a shadowed hand gripping the side of the wall that obstructed my view of the stairs and the person on them. What broke the moment of silence was the faint, muffled scream coming from the back of my throat. It was the only amount of sound I could muster up in my frozen state. I was a deer in headlights, the perfect victim for any predator. It was hard to say whether I was still paralyzed or if it was the sheer terror I felt in that moment that was responsible for my immobilization. The hand methodically lifted its fingers and slowly tapped each one of them back down, creating a sickening drumming sound. Once, then twice, then 3 times the lone hand strummed before the rest of the body became slightly illuminated when it moved to the last and final stair. As its entire form was revealed, my wide eyes trailed up to at about 8 feet in the air. It was gigantic. Its arms were as long as its height, and the creature's face had a mouth that stretched from side to side. It wore a gut-wrenching expression that could only be described as a smile due to the fact that it had no teeth. Just a huge mouth stretched agape with bleeding gums that dripped down to my wood floors. To me, it was an indication that this was not a figment of imagination but a real, dangerous threat, and I needed to step into action immediately. The thing let me soak in its disgusting appearance fully, so that its next performance was all the more terrifying. It produced a series of guttural, horrid sounds that could only be described as its laugh. It witnessed me using every ounce of energy I had in my body to just cry out or move, finding amusement in my distress. All I could do was cry silently. My eyes streamed with tears while I stared unblinking at the creature that slowly approached me like a lion with their wounded prey. It was just feet away now. Its long arms dangled behind its moving legs, dragging along the floor, still drumming its fingers to that nightmarish beat. The creature moved at a slow pace, taking advantage of my paralysis. It knew that dragging out this hellish scene would make the kill all the more satisfying for its demented desire. At this short distance, I was able to see its face fully illuminated now, and it was awful. Still smiling with its red gums, its small eyes were as wide as its anatomy allowed, and their gaze never left mine. It had a nose, but it was just 2 holes that looked like they were hand-poked by whoever created this god-awful being. It was almost as if it were human, but the devil seemed to have poisoned this one. It was now close enough to smell my fear and see the glint of hope for survival fading in my eyes. I had to do something, anything that would make me feel like I at least tried to fight for my life. That's when I saw it in the corner of my eye. This faint green glow just inches away from my frozen hand. My bong. Amongst all the chaos, I forgot about it, but something within me screamed at me, try to move again. So I did. I focused all of my energy toward moving my hand to grabbing my newly chosen weapon, and by luck only created by a miracle, it worked. I was able to grab it, and within moments I had swung the thick glass over the creature's head, again and again and again. Its blood wasn't red like the color dripping from its toothless smile. Instead, it was dark black. The tar-like goo was everywhere. I felt it hit my face, go into my mouth. I saw it cover the couch, floors, and walls. The scene was brutal. The once terrifying creature was now smashed and bent in a multitude of ways, now left somewhere between the state of solid and liquid. Its face was no longer distinguishable from the other battered parts of its body, and I smiled. I smiled now that that thing no longer had his. I stood over its body with a mix of shock, adrenaline, and morbid joy that I had almost laughed if it were not for my intense panting. I could not stop breathing, gasping for air as a rush of blood flowed to my brain. I awoke to the comforting feeling of bed sheets and a pillow under my head. The relief that this was all a dream showered over my body as I slowly opened my eyes and went to stretch my limbs. But I couldn't. My arms were prevented from moving further than at my hips. The sound of metal hitting against itself brought my attention to the handcuffs around my wrists that were connected to the bed's rails. Then, the slow and continuous beeping that was once hidden in the background got drawn forward as I began to scan my surroundings. I was in a hospital room, still covered in that sticky, metallic-smelling substance. Though it was not a deep black like I previously witnessed, but crimson red. The unfamiliar voice of a man brought me to the present and out of the fog. "Miss," the officer started in a low and careful tone, "do you remember anything from last night?" The question made my face turn in an almost offended expression after a second of recollection.
Of course I did.
I don't think I will ever be able to scratch that disgusting smile out of my memory. The immense fear I felt can still be there if I just close my eyes. Why, yes, it was the first time I heard my own voice in hours. There was this thing. The officer gave an unamused look to his colleague as he let out a deep breath and laid a stack of images on my lap. My mother laid violently killed on our living room floor. If it weren't for her nursing uniform, I wouldn't have been able to tell that it was even human due to the unnatural state of anatomy she was left in. Before I was able to even process what the officers were insinuating, I screamed. I screamed so loud that I felt my dry vocal cords rubbing against each other and let out a flood of tears that assisted the sobs of confusion, sadness, and anger. Out of my harsh cries, I recognized a hauntingly familiar sound. I looked up to see the officer drumming his fingers on his notepad and watched as his mouth started to stretch into that distinct, disgusting, and unforgettable toothless. This story takes place when I was 22 years old. I had just gotten home from a long night of stocking shelves at my local grocery store. I worked the closing shift, so I usually got home around midnight. I shared a cheap apartment with my roommate, Mark. We weren't in the best of neighborhoods, but I just felt lucky to have a place to live that wasn't my parents' basement. I threw my jacket on the coat rack next to the front door and walked into the kitchen to rummage through the fridge for something to eat. I had just pulled a frozen burrito out of the freezer when I noticed something weird. My bedroom door had been slightly open when I walked by the hallway. I know this doesn't sound strange at first, but I specifically remembered closing it that morning when I left for work. I like my privacy, so I always remember to shut my door when I leave for the day. I stepped back into the living room and looked down the hall. "Hello," I called. There was just dead silence. Not wanting to let the fear get the better of me, I walked across the living room and flicked on the hallway light switch. "Mark, is that you?" I asked. Mark had always been a bit of an odd guy, so I couldn't help but think that maybe he was trying to play some sort of weird prank on me. Maybe waiting to jump out of my closet or something when I entered my room. When I finally got to the bedroom door, I gently pushed it open. The light from the hallway illuminated a large portion of the room. I looked around, definitely feeling the creepy vibes. There was no one there, and nothing looked out of the ordinary. Just the usual, my twin bed with my nightstand just to the left. I closed the door shut and walked back into the kitchen. I popped my dinner in the microwave and pressed the start button. While that was cooking, I turned on the television, ready to put on a scary movie to watch and relax. Suddenly, I heard a muffled thump coming from down the hall. At first, I thought it was the neighbors or something. They can be pretty loud sometimes, and it's not unusual to hear a loud bump in the night. But then it happened again, and this time I could tell for sure it was coming from down the hall. "Mark," I called once more. The microwave beeped just then, and I nearly had a heart attack.
Yeah, sorry.
Dropped something. I could hear him say through the door. I'll admit, I felt a little better knowing that Mark was home. I walked back into the kitchen to get my food. And that's when my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message from Mark. Hey dude, running a little late here at work. Could you please leave the door unlocked for me? My stomach dropped to the floor, and a chill ran down my spine. I texted back. Wait, you're still at work? He responded only a few seconds later.
Yeah, why?
At that moment, there was another noise from the hall, and I looked up. The silhouette of a large man was standing there, holding what appeared to be a butcher's knife. I turned and ran towards the front door, hearing the heavy clunk of the man's boots behind me. He wasn't running. Instead, it sounded like he was slowly walking, taking his time. I didn't stop to look back. I ran down the emergency staircase and out into the parking lot where I called the cops. The cops showed up just a few minutes later. They went upstairs and searched my apartment, but they said they didn't find anyone. What they did find still terrifies me to this day. As they were searching the apartment, the cops found a note left on the kitchen table, held under a salt shaker. On that note, only one word was written.
Soon.
This genuinely happened last night. This was my third night home alone while my parents were out camping. I'm in the kitchen, microwaving some super noodles because I'm a lazy asshole and cooking them on a stove is too much effort. It's about 12:30 a.m. and I just came off of our /no sleep, so I'm feeling pretty jumpy. My kitchen has a glass door which leads out to the patio and a hole where my cat flap was. It broke, so now it's just an open hole. I tend to not look through the glass door, especially being in the jumpy mood I am, in fear I'll see something creepy, whether it's me imagining it or not. Anyway, while I'm waiting for my noodles to cook, I sit on the worktop with my cat. I glance at the door and notice something odd. The raindrops on the outside of the window have a horizontal line going through the middle, as if someone ran their finger across the outside of the door recently. I dismiss it and continue waiting. The noodles are half done, so I go to take them out to stir when a tap on the window startles me. I end up burning my hand on the hot bowl. At first I thought nothing of the tap, since it's windy outside and a lot of shit in the garden is flying about. I place them back in the microwave and continue sitting on the worktop. I glance over at the door again and notice another line, parallel to the first, roughly 3 inches below it. This can't be a coincidence. I get a little freaked out and begin to think one of my friends is playing a prank or something stupid. I head over to the door and flick the switch to turn on the patio light. The light comes on, but I can't see out the door due to the reflections. I lean in towards the door and cup my hands either side of my face to look outside. I peer left, nothing there. I peer right and literally almost shit my fucking pants. I get a glance of a dark figure over by the steps of my patio which lead to the garden. Before I have time to even blink, there's a loud snapping sound, and the power goes out. Seeing as I'm home alone, you can imagine that I'm ready to shit a house worth of bricks. I run out of the kitchen and over to the electric meter. We still have £4 left on it, so the power must have tripped out. I open the grid box and start flicking random switches, panicking like a fucking seal on crack. I finally push the right switch. All the lights come back on, but only for a split second. This happens every time I flick the switch. I flick it, lights come on, switch goes back down, lights go off. So I stand there in the dark, alone. No idea what to do. The grid box, not sure if that's what it's called, but yeah, is located directly above my front door, which is an old wooden door with frosted glass windows. I stand there frantically flicking the switch, begging for light, when I notice something rush past the front door. In a flurry of fear and frustration, I rip open the door and shout, "Fuck off," as loud as I can. Nothing is there, but I feel as though I'm being stared at. And no, not the cliche, I feel like I'm being watched. It was like nothing I'd ever felt, as if there was someone staring at me right before my face, almost nose to nose. 1,000 bricks were shot. I slam the door shut and flick the switch again. It comes back on. I'm in tears of relief and fear. I go back into the kitchen, jumpy as fuck, seeing shadows in the corner of my eyes, mega paranoid. I step in something warm and mushy, look down, and my noodles are on the floor. Now I know something weird as shit is happening. I hold my nerve. Open a microwave. The bowl is still there, empty. Now that all my cynicism is gone, I run over to the patio door. The light is still on. Open the door, walk outside barefoot in the pissing rain, and look over to where I thought I saw a figure. Nothing there. I stutter the words, assess stop now guys, this isn't funny. Obviously, I'm just being naive. I turn to go back inside only to see the most chilling thing for me ever. Not only are there 2 lines across the glass door, but 2 clear handprints which have been dragged down the window also. At this point, I'd had enough. I rush up to my bedroom, turn the light on, get into bed and wait. I must have fallen asleep because I awoke the next morning to my parents entering the drive. I go downstairs and let them in. I quickly tell them how glad I am that they're home and apologize for the mess in the kitchen. I don't tell them what happened other than the power cutting out. My mom walks into the kitchen and calls out, "What mess?" I go in after her and see that the kitchen is spotless. I open the microwave and my noodles are in there, still in the bowl. I check my foot. It's clean, no stain from the noodles. I begin to think I imagined it all. I tear up thinking I've gone crazy. My parents ask what's wrong. I just walk over to the door and tear up even more. I'm not crazy. The handprints are still there. I think I'd rather be crazy. This is all true, which is why it's not as thrilling as you probably hoped. I'll be sure to post any other paranormal happenings I come across. Hopefully there won't be any more. Edit. I forgot to mention that I got yelled at for leaving the oven on overnight, yet I don't actually recall using the oven. Although, this is possibly just me entering Alzheimer's mode. Edit. 12:30 a.m., not p.m. Note. To clear up some confusion, worktop equals countertop. Edit. Grid box equals breaker box. Note. Also, when I stepped on the freshly cooked noodles, they were warm, then in the morning the bowl was still piping hot. Completely forgot about this. Okay, so it's been 2 days since the whole noodles series of events. You should probably read that first. Up until about 2 hours ago, nothing out of the ordinary had happened. That I've noticed anyway. I'm not the most observant person. First off, excuse me for any small mistakes I make since I'm still pretty shaken up even though it was only a small thing. And by shaken up, I mean I'm on the verge of pursuing a new career as a woman's vibrator. That's how much I'm shaking. So, I was sat in my room listening to music through my headphones. Next to me was a mirror which I placed there so I can see if somebody comes into my room while my back is turned and my headphones are in. Yes, I'm a paranoid fuckwad. Anyway, so there I was, happily bobbing my head as I listened to Beyond Creation Deal With It, and one of my favorite parts come on. I sit back and close my eyes for a moment, absorbing the music. About a minute passes when I feel a cold sensation on my neck. Feels like either a finger or a very cold, thin phallus brushing past. Startled, I sit up and rub my neck. I feel a kind of cold sweat on my fingers, ghost just eek. Dismissing it, I continue to slump in my chair, eyes closed. Roughly 5 minutes later the song finishes, so I open my eyes to change the song. Then I glance into the mirror and jump like a fucking kangaroo when I catch a glimpse of the exact same figure I saw in my garden. It's about average height, darkest shade of black you could imagine, and had no features, just a plain black silhouette. And, yet again, before I have a chance to react, poof out go the motherfucking lights once again.
Shit.
I yell at the top of my voice. I panic for a few seconds, tense with fear, eyes clenched shut. At this moment, I want to do anything but turn around. I feel a cold hand on my shoulder, even through my t-shirt. In a frenzy, I swing my right arm behind me furiously. I don't know why, possibly to reassure myself there's nothing there, and there wasn't. Not anymore, at least. The lights come back on. Turns out my dad was still downstairs during all this and flicked the breaker switch back on. Well, for me, now there's certainly no denying that some creepy shit is going on in my house. And it's starting to get to me. I fucking wince every time I look in that mirror. Oh, and I took the liberty of uploading a photo of my view of the mirror from where I was sitting. Sorry if I disappointed you guys. Apparently my ghost doesn't like giving me super awesome r/no sleep material. Still scared the shit out of me though. Miniature update. Last night I lay in bed, under the covers of course, I'm scared of things. I just put down my iPhone, shitty 1G, which barely works anymore. I lay there for a while, trying my best to push that evening's events from my mind, when I notice a dim light on my ceiling. I look down over the side of my bed, and my stupid shitty iPhone is going haywire, keeps locking and unlocking itself. This wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the fact it doesn't have a lock button, so I can't actually turn it off. So anyway, I ignore it, shut my eyes, and go the fuck to sleep. Shortly after, I'm awoken by a loud clicking sound, followed by a swoosh. I look towards the foot of my bed and notice that my door has swung fully open slowly because it didn't make a bang when it hit the wall, and I can now peer out into the empty hallway. There was absolutely no draft in my house. My window was shut too, and both my parents were sound asleep. Oh, and guess what else? When I got up this morning, that power was out and had to flick the breaker switch once again. I'm considering moving to a friend's house if this shit goes on. Here's the door, since you people like seeing my doors so much. Oh. And another thing, the handle is a twisty and it's quite difficult to turn, so this can't have just been a freak act of physics/nature/ablum. Okay, possibly ablum, but never mind.